Hey everyone, welcome back. Brand new Take Aim podcast, big deer and even bigger stories. And we're excited to get a new show out and excited to have Doug Hampton on from The Rival. Doug, many of you might remember Doug, just like I do, from the Druries. I've known Doug in the industry for a long time. He has shot some tremendous deer over that span from the Druries up until now. And this one literally takes the case, and especially Doug said it on the podcast, deer of a lifetime, but we're talking about a 200-plus inch deer he just recently shot this past week in Iowa. And what a story. Thanks for Doug for being on and explaining all this, and such a cool backstory. And Doug's such a knowledgeable hunter. There's so much to learn and take away from this episode. So hope you guys enjoy. It's a great show. Thanks so much, Doug. We'll see you guys again right here next week. Guys, as always, if you want to upgrade to the Huntstand Pro version, use the code TAKEAIM10 at checkout. But let me just tell you about one of the great features that you won't get from the regular Huntstand versus the Pro, and that is the trail camera management system. You can upload images into the Huntstand ecosystem so you can organize them by camera location. Those images will automatically sync with weather, lunar information. Tag specific game cameras so you can organize them and learn each travel pattern based on the range, filter, variables including time, sighting, date, animal type, weather, and wind speed and temperature. So make sure you check that out. Use the code TAKEAIM10. All right, boys and girls, we are live, brand new Take Aim podcast, and excited to get a new show out. Excited to talk another awesome deer story and a big deer. Excited to have this guy on that, especially myself and a lot of people that I'm friends with will remember from way back in the Drury days. But Doug Hampton is here, and excited to speak with Doug. So what's happening, Doug?
Hey man, I'm doing good. I'm on top of the world right now, to be honest with you. So. I bet it's all going well.
Yeah, I bet you it's been an exciting few days, and man, it's a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm glad you took the time because I highly doubt you've had a minute apiece since you shot this deer.
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy, no doubt. But it is a world-class deer. It's a deer that I never dreamed in my lifetime. I mean, don't get me wrong. We all sit around and we all. In the back of our mind, we're like, what if I ever had a chance at a deer of that magnitude? And the truth of the matter is, I hunt really hard. I try to hunt mature bucks, but a deer like this was just, it was just one of those far off fantasies, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And, again, kind of getting back, Doug, to your previous history with the Druries and all the time you've been in front of the camera. It's I feel like it's been years now. That's saying a lot, right? Because you've had a lot of opportunities, multiple states, your home state of Arkansas, and I know every year you travel out of state. So for you to say that, that really kind of tells the listeners like what kind of deer this is, because it's pretty special. I mean, like you said, it's legitimately a once in a lifetime type of deer.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No doubt. He's got 26 scorable points. He's got extremely long main beams. They're right around 27 inches. He's got tine length. He's got a lot of non-typical points, multiple brows, huge bases, over 6-inch bases. I'd love to say I did this, I did that, or whatever, but the truth of the matter is the good Lord blessed me, and I don't want you to think I did not know the deer was there. I knew the deer was there. Matter of fact, there's a huge backstory to this buck. And when it comes to Iowa, the reason that Iowa is so much different than anywhere else, I normally I don't use a lot of outfitters. I just don't. I never really have. I'm not going to tell you haven't ever gone to them, but I'm the guy that I like to go and do my own thing. If I have some ground that I can lease, or even I used to hunt a lot of public land before the videoing, and there's a lot of reasons why I don't do the public land as much, because you get into laws and things like that, and it's easy to mess up whenever you are videoing these hunts and putting them out to the public. And so Iowa's a little different because it's just harder to get a tag. Now, the way they've got it set up, I wouldn't change it for the world. The thing that the DNR is doing in Iowa, I wouldn't change it. And I am, an out-of-state non-resident, and I love the way they do it. They make it to where you get one tag as a non-resident, and you may have to wait years to get it. Now, several years ago, I realized that, and so as much as I love to bow hunt, I knew my odds of drawing a tag were very, very. They're much higher if you're willing to gun hunt, and so that's why I chose to gun hunt Iowa. And a few of my friends, they started an outfitter up there, and man, he was sending me pictures, and he was like, "Hey, we're going to give this thing a go. We'd love for you to come up and hunt." And I go up there, I pay for my hunt just like everyone else, but I've got the opportunity to hunt that place a lot. And so I know that land and I know that area, even though it's not technically my lease or, my ground that I own. I just know the area. And there is a lot of people that hunt around there. And matter of fact, they do a whole lot of deer drives around there. Not my friends that I was hunting with, but the people in the surrounding area. And so a lot of times they use their place as a safe zone. Other words, there might be weeks or they may a lot of times not even hunt that first gun season just to let those deer pile up in this, on their land. And I think it's, roughly around 600 acres that they have in this one particular spot. And so they just let them deer pile up. Well, this trip we were dealing with standing corn. They still had not cut the corn. And so I was having a rough hunt, man. I'm telling you, I was having an extremely rough hunt before the day that I actually saw him. But, there's a big story about this deer that comes before the actual, getting to pull the trigger and being fortunate enough that my bullet found the mark, so to speak, and that I ended up putting him down very quickly. And but there's such a big story to this, and so a lot of times, like on my Facebook post, everybody wants a picture, right? Everybody post a picture. A deer to me, and not just a deer of this caliber, I usually do it on all my deer. Most all of my deer, they have a story. And I have a tremendous respect for the whitetail buck and for these mature bucks that basically they kick our tails all year long and sometimes several years in a row. And I have so much respect for them. And so I like to tell the story of what happened. I think when it comes, it's not a typical hunt where I just went out there, had no clue he was there. Oh my goodness, what's that? And shot him. No, this deer goes back a couple of years. Two years ago, I drew a tag for Iowa, and I had a muzzleloader tag late season, and I tend to come in January. Whenever I want to go for that particular tag. A lot of your bigger deer are going to come to the food source. They're a slave to their stomach during that time of year, and you got 10 days into January that you can hunt. And so I'll come up and, I'll basically stay from January from the 1st of January until the last day if I have to. And I've left without killing a deer there before. It's not a canned hunt. It's not easy by any means. And if you get the right weather and you have the right deer in the area, your chances of killing a world-class deer are way higher, in my opinion, than anywhere else in the United States that I know of, that is. And so I went during January. I was hunting the same particular farm, and that year it was corn as well. And I watched this buck come out one afternoon, and I and I got footage of him. He walked across. I couldn't tell much about him, and I couldn't get a shot at him because the way the hill rolled around, he was just cutting to the south of me, and all I could really see was his neck and head as he walked through there. And I knew that this deer was special. I could see splits off his twos, splits off his threes. I couldn't tell a lot about his eye guards or his bases or anything like that. But I knew he was a big deer, and he was a huge frame deer. And I had a guy filming me, and I was like, I'm going to kill that deer tomorrow. And he'll be back. We had the weather and everything. And so, funny story, we go back to the outfitter, and they were like, man, what did you see? And I told them, I said, I saw a really big deer, couldn't tell that much about him, but I know he's a deer I'm gonna go after tomorrow. And he said, let me show you. It's kind of funny how it all worked out, but he said, let me show you this picture of this deer. He said, I've got one deer on that farm that I do not want shot. He said, I feel like he's 3.5 years old, and he's got splits on his twos, splits on his threes, and he started describing the deer that I saw. And I was like, well, I said, that deer's going to be within 60 yards was my exact words. I said, that deer's going to be within 60 yards of my blind tonight, I guarantee you. And I wanted to argue with him. I was like, are you sure that's a 3.5-year-old? Man, he looks 4 to me, and if he's 4, I don't, I'm probably not going to be able to hold off of him. He said, I guarantee you he's 3.5. He said, but I'll tell you this. He said, the deer could get killed, and he could get killed by anybody. But if we let him go, he's got 200-inch potential. And I'll never forget him telling me that. And I'm big on management myself. And it's okay if you're not, right? I mean, deer hunting, we all stand together, and what suits me may not suit you, and that's okay. We can all do our own thing. But I do know that I love the chance at shooting a huge mature buck. And that place is just special. It's super, super special for that reason. And he told me that, and I ended up that afternoon that he asked me to pass that deer. That deer jumped the fence at about 120 yards, and he walked right to me, and he stopped at 30 yards, and he started eating in the standing corn. And there's a kind of a little quick backstory to that. There was probably a 150-inch 9-point behind this buck. I never saw him. We videoed it, and I never saw the deer. I was staring at this deer the entire time, and he walked in there. I had him in my scope. I looked, I just checked him out, put my gun down, and that was it. I just didn't pull the trigger. I didn't want to, mess up a friendship. I didn't want to do the wrong thing. And here's what I told the cameraman I was with. I said, if I feel like that deer's 4 years old, if I feel like he's 4, I'm going to shoot him, and then it's just going to be what it is. I pay for my hunt, and there's a 140-inch minimum. He's it's well within my rights to shoot the deer. He's 170 inches. And when the deer walked out there, I'll be honest with you, I could not argue the fact that he was 3.5. There was no way I could do it. I tried to, but I couldn't do it. And I ultimately ended up not shooting anything. Like I say, I never even saw the huge 9-point, 150-inch 9-point that was right behind him. Never even saw him. He's on the video, and I never saw him because I was so focused on that deer. And he came out with 6 minutes left of shooting light. It was 6 minutes until shooting hour. And I had plenty of time to shoot him, had plenty of light. It was just one of those days that it was, sunny, and we could have killed him on video. Everything would have been great. But ultimately I didn't. And then, last year, no pictures. The deer is as if he just totally vanished. They had no information on this buck anymore. And of course, you know what I'm thinking because I'm always asking about him. And they're like, no, we got nothing, man. He didn't show back up. We don't know if he moved. We don't know if he was killed. We don't know if, because there's a lot of people that hunt in that area. And they had no information on it. And so I just believed in my heart, and I don't know how to explain this, but I believed that if anybody would have killed him, especially last year, that we would have heard about it. I just felt like he was going to be a big enough deer as a 4.5-year-old that we would have heard about him. Even if it was local in that area, somebody would have said something. Somebody would have, got a picture. It would have just kind of, how the internet is nowadays. Somebody would have found out about it, and we would have known. And that's just not what happened. Yeah, that's just not what happened. Nobody heard. And so this year, I decided I wanted to put in for a first season gun tag in Iowa. And, it's a 5-day season. And so you literally have 5 days to get it done. And if you don't, it's just better luck next year on drawing a tag. And so I put in for the 5-day season. And during the summer, my buddy Jeremy Ward sent me pictures of this deer. He said, and we started calling this deer Full Curl. And the reason we did is because, whenever I think it's rams that whenever they're mature, they've got that full curl. And so we knew that he was super mature now. And so that, being a mature deer, we were definitely going to be after him. And so it was kind of a joke at first, like, oh, yeah, man, he's going to be full curl this year, And then we ultimately ended up just naming the deer Full Curl. That way we knew who we were talking about.
So, and Doug, when you – sorry to interrupt, but when you were on this deer during that muzzleloader season, that was two full seasons ago, so it was just like calendar-wise 2 years ago at 3.5, right? So this year we're talking a 5.5-year-old deer?
5.5-year-old buck, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, he's 5.5 years old.
So at 4.5, he disappears. Nobody sees him. And then this year, Jeremy gets pictures of him. So when he got the pictures, was it, velvet season or, was he in ag? Was he on mineral? What was the deal on how you guys relocated him?
Right. No, I believe that the deer was on, a lot of times people don't realize this. A deer will use a scrape. A deer will use a scrape during, August. A lot of times during the summer, they'll use a licking branch. And it, I'm about 99% sure that's he put his cameras where his scrapes were. They're always there every year, and so he put his cameras on that scrape and ended up getting him walking by. But basically, the edge of a field, and where there was an overhanging limb, and that's where he was getting the pictures. Those deer just walked there. They just walked that area, And this year it was standing corn. And they just walked through there. A lot of times, on the rotation, they got beans, and it seems like there's more deer early then, but once they cut that corn on the corn years, it seems like it's just a little better hunting in there.
Gotcha. Okay. So I take it this was on a field edge, this camera?
Yes.
Okay.
The camera's on a field edge, yes, sir. Definitely. And so we got, he didn't get many pictures of him, and that was the thing. He got a picture or two to know he was there. That's basically what it amounted to.
And right away, he knew it was that deer?
Oh, yes, without a doubt. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, they've got a lot of great deer. Like, that place is amazing. Iowa itself is amazing for big deer. But that place in particular, it's when I tell you it's the best place I've ever hunted in my life, it's the best place I've ever hunted in my life. As far as, a lot of times I've been able to see some great big deer, but you can see a long ways. They've got about 300 acres of standing corn or, corn out there or beans. And so when that corn's cut or those beans are out there, you can see a long way. So you may be in one spot hunting out of a box blind, but you can see for hundreds and hundreds of yards, way beyond shooting. And so you need a really good pair of glasses when you hunt there. And I saw some world-class deer. I mean, some really nice deer. And I always look at it whenever I go there, I'm going to get one opportunity. I've always had that one opportunity. And, it didn't always work out. I've passed some very good deer. They have a 140-inch minimum on their bucks, and that helps. Or if it's a mature buck, 4.5 or older, then they waive the penalty on it. So they do a good job of managing. And I'll tell you this too.
What zone are you guys in, Doug, out there?
Zone 5.
Zone 5. Okay.
Yes, sir. It's Centerville, Iowa, is where it's at. So
gotcha. That's a great area. Yeah. Obviously, it's
great
area. Yeah.
All of southern Illinois, is great, but that's just where their outfitters at.
Good deal. Yeah, I mean you can't beat southern Iowa for sure. So I know you mentioned like this roughly then it was 600 acres. Is it still 600? And is it a mixture of rolling timber and ag, or how's the property layout that you were hunting on?
So it's just like typical Iowa. There's a lot of big fingers, a lot of big draws. There's creeks that run through the place, but ultimately it's out of the 600 acres, about 300 of it's corn. And then they have, cattle ground down to the south. They've got alfalfa fields. It's just a really good mixture of topography or landscape, I guess you would say. The topography on it is it's laid out perfectly, and they've got some pretty significant blocks of timber that butt up to them as well. And then they own some of the wood blocks, but the majority of what they own is the food. And so for that particular area, they've got the majority of the food. And so it late season, it draws a lot of deer in there. A lot of times when deer get in there, because they don't pressure, if there's one thing they do on this place, they don't pressure their deer like a lot of people do. But the surrounding area is highly pressured. So they basically let those deer just kind of pile up on them. And like I say, normally they do not even hunt this farm during the first gun because there's so much going on around. They just want them deer to pile up, especially this year with the, standing corn. They wanted to give those deer a safe space. But here's the thing. When I passed that deer 2 years ago, Scott told me, he said, as long as he's alive, you can come and hunt him. He said, there's going to be other hunters that get to hunt him too. But if that's the area you want to hunt, we'll put you in that area and you can continue to hunt him. He said that's basically all he could do for me, but I thought that's a pretty good deal. So, this summer, whenever he got that deer walking by that licking branch, and he sent me that picture, I was like, that's the only deer I'm going to hunt. That's where I'm going to go, and that's where I'm going to stay. And, I watched this deer. I saw this deer 2 different times before, and I saw what he did, and I saw where he went when he left, and I felt like, I knew where this deer was living. I knew where he was bedding. I knew where he was feeding. I knew where everything about this deer, and there's a huge ditch in a block of timber that is, when I tell you it's thick, super, super thick, and they find the majority of their sheds in this one area. And so it's the bedding area. Normally, they never let anyone go in there. They just don't. There's stands around the outside, and there's several different directions that these deer can come out of this block of timber, and they'll never let anyone go in there. Well, with it being standing corn, they agreed to let me go in there and push in a little bit, because I knew that to kill this deer, I was going to have to get in the timber. Now, let me tell you why I knew I had to get in the timber to kill him. Because I started my hunt on this 5-day hunt. Saturday and Sunday, I sat on the edges. And I sat there from daylight to dark. I was in the stand 45 minutes before it got daylight, and I was in the stand probably about 30 minutes after dark before they'd come and get me. And we just took a lunch, and when I tell you I was all in on this buck, like I was all in on this particular deer. And the only thing that kept me really focused, because I'm not going to lie to you, I wasn't seeing many deer. That first morning, I didn't see many deer at all. At 10 o'clock, I heard the gunshots. And when I tell you I heard the gunshots, I've never in my life, from 10 to 2 o'clock, I've never in my life heard so many shots. And what they were doing, they were
everybody
driving
pushing.
Deer.
Yeah.
They were pushing deer on, when I tell you they were pushing deer on 3 sides of us. And we know they do that. They do that on the first weekend every year. That's a tradition that they have, and it's okay. They can do it however they want to do. They're hunting just like we are. I choose to sit and hunt. They choose to walk and hunt, whatever they want to do. But it really, really, normally it benefits us in the fact that they push all the deer to us. And so all we got to do is just leave our timber alone and hunt on the edges, and then we've got a super advantage going forward. But here's the kicker. There's always something that happens that shouldn't happen. And this, when I tell you, caused me to be depressed, man, I can't explain how down I was. So I'm sitting here in this block of timber that's ours, that they lease. They don't, the other people don't stop where they're supposed to stop. They come on past.
The guys driving, you mean?
They were driving, yes. And they drove into our timber. And they basically drove the bedding area that this deer was living in. These deer started coming past me like you can't even imagine. And I could hear the people hooping and hollering and talking. They were so close that I could hear them talking. And so I wanted to get down and walk.
Now, Doug, are you still on the edge? I just want to make sure I'm following you. Are you?
Yes, sir. I'm okay. On the edge. I'm where there's a little buffer zone between the timber and the standing corn. And so I'm basically sitting on that edge watching these deer. It's about a 20-yard buffer zone, and it's just grass in there. And they come out, and they walk across that grass and then into the corn and wherever they're going from there. And so I'm sitting there watching that. And these deer start piling out of that timber like you can't even imagine. Of course, I'm furious, right? Because these people are on our property.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they're not supposed to be there. But here's where I started thinking. Obviously, I'm not going to get down and start walking to them. I'm going to sit there and see what comes out of the timber. And I was at a point where I couldn't see one side as good as I could see the rest, and there was another hunter that was hunting with us. And he was probably about, I don't know, maybe 300 to 400 yards to the northeast, and all those deer started piling out of that timber, and I never saw him come out of the timber, but the guy that was basically down the creek from me, he said he thought he saw him, come out of there and on the other side of the block, come out of there and basically ran by him, but he couldn't get a shot. And he was pretty sure that it was him, but he just didn't know. And so that told me that he was in there just like we suspected. He was in there, and that's where he was bedding. And it gave me a little bit of confidence to know that he was out of there, but I also knew he was going to go back. I'm not telling you can't, a big deer doesn't really like to put up with intrusion. But that doesn't mean they won't return until they're bumped continuously. And so the next day, it was a exact repeat of Saturday. So Sunday, same thing. They were deer driving. I probably heard 100 or more shots. And I'm talking about in the surrounding area. And the only difference is they didn't come on to us then. They stopped. Not only did they not come on to us, they stopped well short of us. And so they basically only drove it one time. And I felt like overnight that deer was going to, early in the morning, what have you, he was going to return to his safe zone because we just don't go in that timber. And sure enough, I believe that's what he did. And I sat there the next Wednesday. You have to keep this in mind too. After these folks drove, the deer just didn't move. We just didn't see hardly anything. I think I had seen about 3 bucks in the first 3 days that I hunted. It was that bad.
I believe it. They kind of bad for that heavy driving.
Yeah, I don't mean 3 big bucks. I mean 3 bucks.
Just 3. Yeah.
Yeah, it just 3. I mean, it was when they drove that timber, it just devastated it. But I also in my heart, in the back of my mind, I said, he's not getting out of there. Where's he going to go? He don't have nowhere to go. They drove all that. He's going to come back to where he's always safe. And so I believed he was going to be back in there, and I also believed he was going to be in that deepest ditch in the middle of that timber. It's just brushy, and it's where they find all the sheds, like I talked about earlier. And so day 4, I decided I was going to make a new plan. I talked with Jeremy and Scott. I said, look, I want to go to the furthest side of that block of timber, and I had saw in the past, I had saw a lock-on back in there. And I said, is that lock-on still in there, and is it safe to get in? And they said, yeah. They said it leans a little bit, and it's probably not going to be very comfortable to sit in or film in, but if you want to go in it, you can. And I said, I do. I want to go in there, and I want to sit until about 10 o'clock. But if you will, bring me a lock-on and a set of sticks, because I'm going to go hang right next to that deep ditch and in hopes that he comes out of there and I'll get a shot. And they were okay with it. Like they wanted me to shoot this deer. They knew the history with him, and they wanted me to have my best opportunity. They were very, very open to what I was, suggesting I wanted to do. Not only were they open, but they were all for it. And right there at the last minute, I had a change of heart. And the reason I did is because the wind started coming out of the southwest. And I thought it was going to basically stay west all day. But I don't know if it was the way it was swirling in there or what have you. But it was south-southwest, and it was, in my mind, the wind that I needed to kill that deer as long as he came out on that side of the timber. Because I felt like if I gave him the wind and then I would get just far enough east that he would feel comfortable coming through there, that I felt like he was going to come out that side of the timber just because the way the wind was blowing. It was his safest route to get to the corn. And so I decided just to take that stand down and move that stand about 70, 75 yards. And while I was sitting up there that morning, I was glassing, and I found a tree out there that I felt like I could get in, that would be a little more comfortable, that would be, over far enough that the wind would not kill me. And that morning I just didn't worry about it as much because I had the thermals, and I knew the direction the deer were. They were going to be coming from the standing corn back into the bedding area. And so I felt okay about it during the morning. But as it got, started getting up in the day, I knew I needed to get down and make my move. That way I didn't do any damage for the evening. And so they come out there. They said, not only can you move the stand, but they said, we'll come help you move the stand. And so they came in there, and we took, we wrestled that stand, and we got it down, and then we took it on down the ridge and off down a little bit down into on the edge of this finger that came out of the bedding area. I mean, you could see the trails. It was kind of a no-brainer setup as far as just looking at the deer trails that came through there, and I saw a pretty nice scrape that they were starting to hit again. They were hitting it pretty good. Obviously, we know the rut's far and gone, but there's still some deer that are coming back in, around this time, and so it's not out of the question that they're going to be working them scrapes and trying to find that last available doe. So I saw that big scrape about 40 yards to the north of me. That even made me feel way better about my tree that I had picked. And I felt like if they came to that corner, I was going to have the upper hand. And so they came in there. We got everything moved. We trimmed out a few trees and just basically did the old proverbial hang and bang, And we hung the stand, and I knew I was going to ride that stand, for a day and a half, because that's all the season we had left.
Hey,
so
Doug,
I got up in the stand. Mm-hmm.
Was this stand a little bit better based? Did you make this decision based on a thermal as well? Was it a little bit higher in elevation or a little bit lower than where you were?
No, it was definitely higher. Yeah, it was higher. So, the ridge the way the fingers come out, it was just not much higher, but just a little bit higher. In my opinion, it was one of those stands that you're going to have a lot of deer under you, because, as far as a bow set, oh, my goodness, you couldn't. I basically hung it like I would a bow set.
Okay,
and
that's what I was kind of wondering.
Yeah, I hung it just like I would a bow set, but I had the range that I could shoot out a little further, and I could see, one of the things I liked the most was that ridge, the hog's back that ran down into basically into the bedding area that came out both sides of the ditch. I could see all the way down it. I had a little bit better vision as far as seeing everything I needed to see. Not only that, but I bettered myself as far as the wind. And the thing about it was I wanted to give him the wind. I felt like with that southwest wind that he was going to be coming from the northeast to the corn out of the bedding area. I had how you just have instincts. And I felt like that's what he was going to do. Here's a side note on that. How did we even know the deer's still alive? Well, we knew he was still alive because 3 weeks ago there was a bow hunter about 300 yards away from where I was actually hunting him that had him at 40 yards. He was walking down a trail, and he thought he was going to walk 15 yards from him and basically get killed with a bow. But right at the last minute, the deer cut off through a really thick, brushy area, and he walked by the guy, but he was 40 yards away, and the guy just couldn't get a shot. Well, the next day, the guy shot a different buck, and so we knew he was still alive. That's how we knew. I wasn't just in there hunting a ghost. Had that hunter not had a picture of him, or I'm sorry, if that hunter had not had an encounter with him, then it might not have been as enticing to hunt for one deer, so to speak. And so we felt like he was still alive, and you once again I had a feeling that he was there. I walked the edge of timber block. And, man, when I tell you the sign and the tracks, like the huge tracks, like it was just, I just knew there was a big deer in there. And the whole time that I was sitting there, that's what kept me going. Because, once again, I just wasn't seeing, it just wasn't a typical Iowa hunt where you see lots of deer and maybe from a distance you're going to see one or two really big deer. It just wasn't typical. Nothing was typical about what was going on. And so I crawled up in the stand.
Hey, Doug, let me interrupt real quick. Okay. Do you think that being not typical of a Iowa hunt, do you think that was all based on that pressure from the gun drives?
I think it was 100% due to the gun drive. 100%.
Okay. Because you had decent weather, I take all that stuff.
We had great weather. We had high 30s, low 40s, and it was 20s Perfect. In the morning.
Yeah, that's
you couldn't have scripted it any better. The morning that I decided to change gears and to actually go into the timber to hunting, it was foggy that morning. The morning that I ultimately got my opportunity, foggy that morning. About noon, it started to break. The wind started to pick up, blow a little bit, probably 6 to 7 miles an hour. And it was just one of those bluebird sunny afternoons. And it just felt right. The pressure wasn't extremely high, but it was 30.1. I mean, so not horrible by any means. But I felt like it was going to be a good afternoon. Goes back to what I was telling you. Typically, they do not. That's why they don't let any of their hunters hunt that area during the first gun, because that's when they do their drives, and they don't want people to have a bad hunt. I insisted that I stayed in that area and hunted that deer. I've been fortunate enough to kill a lot of mature bucks. Good Lord's blessed me, and I'm very patient when it comes to that. But how many times in your life are you going to get a chance to hunt not just a mature buck, but a world-class buck?
Once or twice if you're lucky. Yeah.
Not very many. And so in my mind, if I just sit in there and just stay in there with him, I'm going to be, at least I'm in the ball game, right? I'm in the stadium. I can at least see what's going on, and maybe if I get a glimpse of him, maybe I can make another move, to get in there closer to where I could kill him. But you have to understand this. I'm already pushing the envelope because I'm about 100 yards or less from where I feel like he's bedding already. So,
and that's down to that bottom you're talking, down to the hog back?
Yeah.
You're saying you're roughly 100 yards? Okay.
Yeah, roughly 100 yards, really, really steep and really, really thick, and I mean really, really gnarly bedding area, like tough to walk through kind of stuff. And I just knew that's where he was bedding. I just knew that's where he was at. I knew that's where he'd returned to after the drives, and it was just an instinct. I didn't know, but I knew. And so I was sitting there that afternoon, and man, I ate my lunch. I got my lunch out and I ate it, and then I went ahead and I started putting on more clothes because we took our heavy clothes off, that way we wouldn't sweat when we were hanging that stand. And then we put all our stuff back, or I put all my stuff back on, and ate my lunch, and man, I was ready for the afternoon. About 2:30, I saw a doe and a yearling come out and walk up on the ridge, and they came right out of that ditch. And I thought, man, okay, starting pretty early, so that's a good thing. And the doe and yearling, they just browsed past me, and then they went over the ridge and then down into another bottom. I said, well, that's a good sign. Got deer moving already. And probably 30 minutes later, I see a little bit of, I see a rack coming. Not a big one, but I see a rack, and a 6-point came in there. He walks down a different finger and comes around, and he walks right up to me, right in bow range, and he's sitting there just staring at me, wondering what the new guy is in the area. And I always believe the best camouflage is sit still and be quiet. And so I just didn't move, and he finally accepted me, and he went on about his business. And it was probably getting right around 4 o'clock, maybe around 3:50 or something like that. And I hear a twig snap, and I start to turn around real slow, and I look behind me, and I'm not sure what it is, And I look, and there's a doe, basically almost in bow range already. She just slipped in on me with that wind blowing, and I had a face covered. I had all this stuff covering my ears. I mean, it was pretty cold, and she just slipped in on me, and so I eased around. And I heard the twig snap, and she was standing there, and I said, "Oh wow, she done got up on me," And there was a yearling, and she was sitting there eating, just browsing right there, and you know how they are. They're standing under you and they're browsing, but yet they're looking at you, and they still don't see you. And I was like, wow, she's just like looking right at me, and she hasn't even made a move yet, like she hasn't paid me any attention. And so I'm sitting here staring at that deer, and I start to turn, back to kind of glance around towards the ditch, and I catch a glimpse of a rack. And when I tell you, and anybody that's ever seen a really, really big deer, it doesn't matter, a big deer to them. When I tell you I lost my breath, I went, you just kind of, it's like you're gasping for that next breath, like you can't get it, and my heart skipped a beat. Like it's not it's a real thing. My heart skipped a beat, and as soon as I laid eyes on what I saw coming out of that ditch, my heart started beating so hard that I could just feel it. My pulse and everything, and I could feel my heartbeat in my head, like everything. It was instantaneous buck fever is the name of it. We all know what it is. And it hit me immediately. Well, I'll tell you this, I have messed up in the past so much that I've kind of learned how to calm myself down. And I've made so many mistakes on big deer in the past that making another mistake, especially on a deer of this magnitude, is not something I want to have to live with over and over and over again like I have in the past. And so I just reached up there really slow, and I hit record, turned the camera on, hit record, and I just started filming him. Where I saw him the first time, I couldn't shoot him right there. But when he took about 15 steps, I could shoot him. And so I turned, and I was thinking about going for my gun, and then he started walking again. And so I'm turning to go for my gun, and then he starts walking again, and I'm like, I gotta do something. I got this doe that's right under me, and she's steadily milling closer to me, but she's just behind me, right? And so I said, I'm going to have to grab this grunt call, and I'm going to have to grunt at this deer to get his attention, or he's fixing to go. He's somewhat basically walking away from me. He's parallel, but he's going away from me, and I've got to get his attention. And so I was in that spot to where, do you really want to grunt with a doe standing right under you? No, you don't want to. But what's your other option? You don't have any other option. Do you just let him walk off, and then you may or may not get another chance at him tomorrow? And so before I got a chance to make my decision to grunt at him, I decided, all right, I'm just going to go for the gun, and I'm going to try to shoot him before he gets too far. And so when I turned to go to grab the gun, this doe catches me. I mean, she's all over me. And I hear, she stomps that foot one time, and I said, oh, Lord, please do not blow, please. And I was just busted. Well, when I went to turn to get the gun, and the doe started, she stomped that one time, and I looked down there, I glanced down at her, and she's just eyeballing me. I mean, she's staring at me. At this point, she's about 8 yards from me, and she's staring right up at me. And so I didn't know what to do. So I eased back around as slow as I could, and I go to start filming the deer again. So I get the camera, and I'm just like, well, I'm just going to film him. I can't do anything. And she starts getting really, really nervous. And you know how it is when they peg you and they start stomping and like doing a half circle. And so she was doing a little half circle behind me and stomping her foot real hard, like not just standing in one space, but as she was walking, bam,
yeah,
bam. Yeah, and you know how they do, and then she turns and she looks back at me. Well, I'm filming now, right? I'm not even going for the gun anymore. I'm already busted, so I'm just going to film this deer until he leaves. And about that time that he saw the doe stomping, like while she was walking. And you could see it, like when I tell you could see what he was thinking, he didn't want to come to that doe. He did not want to come to her. But in the back of his mind, he said, oh, man, I better go check her and see if she's hot, if there's any chance. So he changes his mind. He takes 2 steps and he stops and he looks back at her again. And it was as if he said, oh, what the heck, I'm going to go. And he just rolls his head around. And when he did, he literally did a 90 and he starts walking just straight at me.
Oh, no
and I was
way.
like, oh my gosh. And when he starts walking at me, I don't know if you've ever dreamed of seeing a 200+ inch deer in the wild walking at you, but you cannot prepare yourself for it. And so I'm having to film this deer, and then I'm having to think about shooting this deer too. And I've got it on manual focus. I'm trying to keep him in focus the whole time. And I got this doe absolutely burning me down, and he's just steadily walking, and he's coming. And he's kind of coming at an angle, and so instead of coming straight at me, he starts to veer off, and he's going to get downwind of that doe, which happens to be directly downwind of me. And that's why I wasn't expecting the deer from that direction. I take scent control I take it overboard. I really do. And I was beating this doe's nose already. I'd done beat her down. She was toast. I didn't have to worry about her, but I still had to worry about him. And
now, did that change her attitude any, Doug, that he was coming?
So at this point, she's not worried about him at all. She's not paying him any attention.
She's still focused on you.
Yeah, and so you have to understand this. I'm videoing. I'm trying to keep him center frame and focused. And then every second or two, I'm going from the camera, looking down to my right, and looking at her and making sure, seeing what she's doing. So I'm trying to do all this stuff, and I still have to get my gun that's hanging up behind me. And so, the deer makes his way enough that I'm almost looking back behind the tree, to the right side of the tree, but I'm looking back, behind me because this buck is coming straight downwind of me and the doe. And he's about 80 yards away at this point when he basically, when he decides to wind check us, so to speak. And he stops and he cocks that head. And when he cocked that head and he turned, and he looks over at the doe, at that point, the doe saw him. and this is where things got really, really. This is my break that I needed. When the doe saw him, she turned around because, something's sneaking up on her, right? And she turns around and she looks at him, and when she did, I started moving for the gun. And so I reached around there, and instead of going back behind me to the left to grab the gun, this time I just went on and went to the inside of the tree, and I grabbed the gun, and I had it hanging right there where I could just, grab it real easy. And, man, I pulled that thing off, and I, slid it across. And then so I get the gun almost to my shoulder, and I see the doe. She just turns, and she whoops that head back around and looks at me again. And I was like,
of course,
too late now. I'm here now. I've got the gun to my shoulder. All I've got to do is bring the barrel down. And if I bring the barrel down and I get it pointed right, then all I got to do is look one more time back to my left and check the viewfinder to make sure he's still in it, which I knew he was because he had not moved. And so I check her one more time, and I reach up there and I cock the hammer, and I get it. I go with my eye down to the deer, and I kid you not, this will never happen in a million years again to me or probably many other people. But I promise you, when I looked into my scope, the crosshairs were dead on that deer's heart. Like literally, when I looked into it pointing and I went to find him, the crosshairs were already basically where they needed to be. The problem was, I knew with this doe behind me that I could not get to my shooting sticks. I had my shooting sticks right behind me, but they were just a little bit lower. They were hanging on a limb about where my calf was. And so I would have had to reach all the way back down and grab the shooting stick. I would have had to fumble 3 different things at one time, and I couldn't do it.
Right.
And this buck's standing downwind of me, and he's bobbing his head up and down trying to win me. And then he starts licking his nose. And so he's trying to get me, right? I mean, all this is happening simultaneously. And so all I could do was steady the gun free-handed. I mean, I couldn't get a rest. I couldn't do anything. And I steadied the gun, and I promise you, I said a little old prayer right then. I said, please, Lord, help me make this shot. That's what was going through my mind. Please, Lord, help me make this shot. And I moved. I remember when it was on his heart, I moved it back to the left towards the back of his ribs. And I held low, and I started to squeeze the trigger. And when the gun went off, man, that joker kicked the fire out of me. I'm talking about it popped me. And, when the gun went off, it was instantaneous. He just fell and hit the ground. And when he hit the ground, I guess I started freaking out. And I saw the blood instantly, and I knew I had most likely probably hit him a little high, but I saw the amount of blood that he was losing, and I knew that was the moment that I knew he was going to be mine. The way he fell behind a tree, and then he was trying to push around to get out of there. And so I couldn't, it all happened from the time I pulled the trigger. Before 10 seconds was up, he was no longer moving at all. But I couldn't shoot again. I couldn't do anything because he was behind the tree.
Just the way he fell, yeah.
It was just the way he fell. He kind of fell down the hill. And when he fell down the hill, he just went behind that big tree, and I couldn't see anymore. But I could see his legs were hanging out from the back of the tree, and I couldn't see his rack. I couldn't see anything. But I kept looking at it. I looked through the camera. I looked through the scope, and I just stood there. I jacked another shell in there, got it in there as fast as I could, and I just stood there, and I just held the gun on him. And I bet you I don't know how long I held it, but it seemed like about 10 minutes. And I was like, if you try to get up, I'm gonna try to hit you again, you know. I mean, I just went into full panic mode. And so then it started hitting me. I think that, that's him. When the deer was coming in, don't get me wrong, I knew it was him. But I couldn't tell myself it was him. I couldn't go.
Right.
I try to always, it's shooter or no shooter. That's all it is. It's a deer I'm going to shoot or it's not. I don't start thinking about what he is, what he'll score. I don't think about any of that, and none of that even matters. But when he hit that ground and I started thinking about what deer it was, I was like, oh my goodness, I just killed the biggest buck of my life. I killed the biggest buck of my life, hands down. And, I'm not saying it can't happen, but to kill another deer of that magnitude, it's just hard to do. It's just, and so what makes it so hard is finding them, right? I mean, these deer it doesn't matter if it's Iowa, Kansas, Illinois, it doesn't matter. They're hard to find for a deer to grow that much antler and then to have that much character. And they're just hard to find. Finding them is the hardest thing. And it just started hitting me how big a deal it was. And then I started thinking, what if I would have missed that deer? I started getting nervous, just like, what if I would have missed that shot? What if I would have, what if he gets up? Like, there's so many emotions that go through your mind when you're sitting there in that tree and you're staring basically through the scope at this deer that's laying there, and you're thinking, we've all had it happen, right? You shot a deer and you think he's dead, and then all of a sudden he gets up and runs off. I mean, we've all had it happen. If you've hunted long enough, it's happened. And I was thinking, what if he gets up? What if he catches his wind? And what if he? But then I kept going back. I saw the blood loss. I know that he's done. But then as soon as I would calm myself down, another emotion would hit me. And when I tell you I was a wreck, I was an absolute wreck up in that tree. And, I sat there long enough and I thought, well, I'll get down and I will just ease over there to him and I'll keep that tree between me and him. That way he can't see me. And I'll slip up to the edge of that tree and I'll walk as slow as I can. And I'll have my scope all the way backed out. I'll have basically everything ready to go. I'll have the gun all the way up to my, basically to my cheek. That way if he moves, I'm on him quick, and maybe I can get another shot. I was like, all these things. And so that's what I did. I crawled down and I started easing over to him. And when I got to that tree, I just kind of peeked around the other side of the tree, and I just stood there and I stared at him. And I was looking at his chest because he's going away from me. And I was like, oh, my gosh, like I couldn't believe how big his rack was. I'm looking at him from the back because he's laying facing away from me. And I'm like, I can't believe how big that rack is. And I'm just looking at his chest, and he's not moving. And if he would have been moving, I'd have had to shoot again. If his chest, anything would have been happening, I would have shot again. And I sit there, I bet you I stared at that deer's chest for a good 2 minutes. And after about 2 minutes, I knew he wasn't moving. And so I just said, he's done. And so all I could think about at that moment when I realized he's dead is I want my son like I'm by myself, And
you wanted someone to share that moment with,
Man, yeah.
It's hard, super special that doesn't happen.
So I was like, man, like, I wish my son was here. And so I thought, I got to call him, and I'll let him go up there to this deer on FaceTime. And so I called him with my phone. Thank goodness I had service and battery. And so I got him on FaceTime. And just to see his reaction, because we got to walk up there and see that deer together, you know. And he's 14 years old, right? Loves to hunt. And he was just as excited as I was. And I was there at the deer, and he was at home in Arkansas. And so that was like super, super special.
Yeah, absolutely.
That he got to see that deer when I got to see it, because he wanted to come with me so bad. But we all know what's going on right now, right? I mean,
right.
And so, you know, he stayed back, and oh man, it was special, like so special. And so I didn't even want, like, I don't know how to explain this, but I didn't even want to touch the deer like he was. Like, I didn't even want to touch him. I just wanted to look at him. I just wanted to look at him, and I couldn't believe it. And then I'd get excited. Like, I'd get so excited, and then it would hit me how big he was, and then I'd start just it was almost like it paused me, like it froze me. And then I'd get super excited, and I just couldn't believe what I was looking at, because you have to understand this. As a kid, all I cared about, man, whitetails. Whitetails is my passion. And I always wanted to be that guy that killed that world-class whitetail. But I also knew how hard it is and how tough it is. And so I never in my life thought I'd ever be looking at what I was looking at. And so it was just, you know, I thank God, and I know it's all Him. It's all Him. It's not me. I'd love to tell you that I'm some kind of special hunter, blah, blah, blah. No. It's all the good Lord, man. It's Him giving me the desires of my heart and let me experience the things that I truly always dreamed about, even as a kid. And so I'll never get over how special that was. And here's the thing, man. Those guys didn't have to let me hunt that deer. They didn't have to. They knew that deer was there. They could have been selfish. They could have kept hunters away from me. Instead, they were in there. They had hunters in there basically trying to kill the deer.
Right.
They could have went in there and hunted that deer themselves. They could have told me, no, I could. There's so many things, so many people I have to thank, you know, for the opportunity that I got. And it was so much. And then, you know, I'm standing there and all these things going through my head. And then I had already texted them and let them know that I loved them and I'd killed the biggest deer of my life. Of course, everybody wanted to know, was it full curl? Was it full curl? And, you know, they pulled around and everybody came up at the same time and they started walking through the woods. And I ran over there and I had the GoPro going. I ran over there and I met them and I hugged them and we walked over there and we celebrated together. We got the tag on the deer. We called him in. We did everything right there. And as soon as we got done, man, we went to celebrating, and we went to picking him up and looking at him and seeing what all he was and how many points we thought he had 25 points. He actually had an extra one. He actually had 26 that were over an inch long. We just couldn't get over the magnitude, and you know, I know there's you know, hunters all across the country that hunt their whole life, and they may never get to even see a deer like that, or even get to hunt where there is a deer like that alive, right? I mean, that's even a big thing.
It is.
And so I was sitting there like, I didn't let the moment go. I didn't not think about what I was blessed enough to get to do. And I know there's some people think, oh man, you know, it's just a deer. It's just a deer. No, it's really not just a deer. Like,
yeah,
that's a memory. That's a memory that nobody's ever going to take from me. Ever. And I've got to do a lot of good things in my lifetime, but when I tell you that was one of the most special things that I've ever experienced, it really was. And I can't thank you enough for letting me tell the story. So,
man, I appreciate it, Doug, and I appreciate just some of the thoughts you just had and what you shared, because like you said, that memory isn't just the memory of that deer, it's accumulation of your whole hunting career, right? And that's how I feel. And so many times myself, Doug, if I've been with, just a hunting buddy, I'm kind of like you. I like to just lease land and do it myself and have maybe a buddy or two with me on that property. But if I shoot something, I usually don't even touch that deer, until everybody's there. So a lot of the stuff you said just really resonated, and, it just is, like I said, a great story, because it doesn't happen every day, and it's such a joy to be able to share, a big deer and a really bigger story. So I appreciate it, man, very much.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you. Like I say, it was a hunt of a lifetime for a deer of a lifetime, and I can't thank you enough for letting me just be able to tell it. I know there's hunters all across the country that love to hunt as much as I do, and I'm very, very fortunate, and a lot of my priorities, wrap around being able to deer hunt in the fall. I get to deer hunt a lot, but the reason I do is because I work, during the rest of the year to be able to do that. I put myself in that position, and I realize I'm not. That some people aren't fortunate enough to get to do that. It doesn't make them any less of a hunter. Some of the best hunters I know that I've ever known will never ever be on a TV show. They'll never ever be in the industry, but they are hardcore deer hunters, and they know what they're doing, and they're really good at what they do. And I have a ton of respect for those people, and I know who they are too. So
I got you, and I totally understand, Doug. And I know eventually, that footage will be out. And I mean, we didn't get a chance, but real quick, Doug, I know I've kept you way over the time I promised you I'd keep you, but let everybody know where eventually we can see this deer. And I know that obviously when I get the show out the next day or two, that I'll post media art, and I'm going to include every picture I can. But it's amazing deer. It's such a great story. But let us know where eventually we can see the actual footage.
Right. So we've got a lot of different things going. But if you want to keep up with what we're doing right now, just basically go to The Rival on Facebook. It's The Rival TV show, and we will have this footage. I'm not sure when we'll air it. I will tell you this: the footage is really, really good, and I'm not saying that because I self-filmed it. I'm just saying that because the doe had me pinned down. I had to move slow, and I had to. I couldn't do nothing but film the deer. So the footage is phenomenal, and the story I just told you, it's laid out in the footage. You'll be able to see every bit of it, all the way up to the doe just staring at me. It's just one of those things that it just all worked out and it came together. I actually showed one of the guys on the. I showed Bart Goins the footage on FaceTime last night, and he couldn't even believe it. He said, "I don't even know how you held it together to even keep the camera on him." And I don't either, except for I had that doe burning me down, and I just was thinking, filming. Got to be a camera guy before a hunter when you're videoing.
When you're filming, yeah.
Basically, we're going to have some new avenues coming up. And so we'll get that information out. But if you want to keep up with us, go to the Rival on Facebook, and all the information will come through that avenue.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to share that as well. And Doug, when it does happen, you get back with me, and I'll share it then as well. And again, appreciate, big deer and bigger stories. That's what today was. And Doug, I can't thank you enough. And hopefully, man, me and you can share another story in the future.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I've got a few good ones.
I know you do.
Yeah.
All right. Absolutely.
As far as we know the deer's well over 200. How far over, we don't know yet. When you have a deer that size, you don't want to just take a score and run with it. You want to get it done right. And so we've been we haven't been putting it out there what he scores, but he's going to be well over it. So
over 200 is big.
I'll let you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know yet, but and here's the other thing about it: none of it matters really, right?
No,
none of it matters. It's that memory that I got of that deer walking in is what really matters.
Absolutely. Boys and girls, as you know, you can find us every week on iTunes, Outdoor Podcast Channel, Unfiltered Outdoor app, now on Amazon Music as well. And Doug, we'll see you again real soon.